Tēnā koutou katoa. I hope you're enjoying the sunshine today. Something that comes up a lot and something that I've recently blogged about is our inability to sometimes accept compliments or praise ourselves or accept recognition when it comes our way. It's something that comes up a lot, and certainly it came up last week when we did the Women in Leadership program on Friday, and it comes up pretty much at every single imposter syndrome course that I run. And I guess it's like a perfect storm where New Zealand is concerned in particular, because we have a culture that is by its very nature quite modest, quite self-deprecating. We don't like to boast, and we don't want to be seen as a tall poppy. So this, alongside our imposter syndrome, which is our inability to internalize these accomplishments, means that we're constantly uncomfortable in the face of praise. And it's really interesting, and it's something that I often talk about in my courses, this negativity bias that's at play in the brain that really contributes in this space. And I want to explain a little bit about that today, and most importantly, what to do with your negativity bias and how to offset it, because it's key in terms of our self-doubt, but it's also key in terms of offsetting our imposter syndrome and boosting our confidence as well when we're able to overcome this. So the negativity bias works in such a way that we are wired to scan the horizon for the worst that can happen. That's how we survived. But obviously what that translates to nowadays is what we don't like about ourselves when we look in the mirror, the thing we wish we'd have said differently at last week's meeting, or what we're not good at, what we haven't done yet. We focus on the negative. That's our brain's natural disposition. And it's slightly uneven, because what you notice is that with our bias in our brain towards the negative, that's the lens that we look through. It's not a reflection of reality. So the reality often is that we're performing well, but what our brain will do is pick out all the bits we could have done better and the bits that haven't gone well, leaving us feeling like we're not performing well, which obviously is where imposter syndrome comes in. Now, Dr. Barbara Fredrickson has done some research in this space. Positivity ratios is the name of the study. And because of this negativity bias that exists, she suggests that we need 3-to-1 ratio to offset it. So that's 3 positive thoughts, emotions, or experiences to every 1 negative, just to offset this natural bias that exists. And I liken it to tramping tracks, for those of you that like tramping. When you go down a walking track that's used every day, like the City to Sea in Wellington, it's flat, often paved, it's smooth, it's pretty easy to navigate. It's well worn, and that's like our negativity bias in our brain. It's why if I asked you what didn't go so well this week, you'd be able to reel off more than one thing. Now, the flip side of that, the tramping track that's our positive neural pathways, if you like, that's a lot more overgrown. When you go up into the Tararuas and you find one of those huts that hasn't been slept in for a year, it's covered in moss, the likelihood is you've gone off the beaten track and it's been difficult, it's been overgrown, it's been steep, bumpy, more difficult to navigate because people don't walk on it as often. And that's like the positive neural pathways in our brain that offset this negativity bias. We don't use it as often. And so therefore it's more difficult to do. But it's like training a muscle. The more we fire these positive neural pathways in our brain, the easier it becomes, so that eventually the brain evens out and our default state is to see both the positive and the negative. So of course life doesn't change. There will still be things we're not good at, and there'll still be things we are, but we'll look through a different lens. We'll look through a lens that is more closely aligned to reality rather than skewed towards this negativity bias. Because let's face it, if your imposter syndrome is asking you, am I as good as they think? You immediately look into your brain for evidence. And what the negativity bias does is it stacks heaps of evidence up in the corner that says, no, I'm not good enough because I could have done this better and this could have gone better. And then on the other side of that, we've waved away all the praise and downplayed all our achievements, putting it down to luck or a mistake, or it's just because they like me. So of course the brain has this uneven weight in terms of what is actually real. We see more of the negative than the positive, so that we can be left feeling like we're not as good as people think. So this is massive in terms of our self-doubt, but also how it impacts our confidence. So what do we do about it? Well, the best way to offset the negativity bias is by reflecting on our successes and our achievements. And this can be easier said than done. And it's not something we have to do in a grandstand way in front of everyone or shout from the rooftops, because we know that culturally we're not comfortable in that space. It's As simple as sitting down on a Friday afternoon and reflecting on the week and figuring out what's gone well. Each time you fire those neural pathways in a positive way, you're walking down that overgrown tramping track to a point where you smooth it out and it becomes our default state. So it's like training a muscle. The more often we lift the weight, the stronger the muscle becomes, to the point where our muscles are strong regardless of whether we're at the gym lifting weights or not. And this is the same. So gratitude practices work because they fire the positive neural pathways. Accepting our praise and success and recognition when it comes our way is also a great way of firing those neural pathways, because if the only thing you can say in the face of praise and recognition is thanks, that's great. You've locked it away. You've locked it away in your brain. You've acknowledged it, and you've started evening out that negativity bias. Not to mention you've acknowledged the person giving you that praise as well. So one of the things that I love the most, and that I still do now in this space, really started out as something that I did because my memory's not great. And I used to keep a note in the back of my diary of all the things that went well during the course of the year when I was in my previous job, because at the end of the year, my annual appraisal my bonus was based on that. I had to sell myself, and I couldn't remember what I did last week, let alone a whole year. So I'd keep this note, and what I noticed is each time I added to these notes about something that had gone well and a success that I'd had, I was firing those positive neural pathways. But what I was also doing is providing myself an evidence portfolio to go to on the off days, on the days where you're thinking, am I this person? Can I do this? You've got a whole stack of evidence that is factual and says, yes, you can. And that was the real strength and power in this stuff. So now it's progressed. I'm a little bit more technologically advanced than the page in my diary. It's now an icon on my desktop. But whether it's an inbox folder or a corkboard on your desk in your office that you stick things to, it's about recording your wins. Because each time you do that, you're firing those positive neural pathways. And you're also providing yourself a portfolio of evidence so that when you are doubting yourself and having those days where you're not so confident, you've got a place to go that shows you, here's all the evidence as to why you can do this. Because we know, because of our negativity bias, our brains will be too heavily weighted in the other direction. We will always be good at spotting the stuff we're not so good at. We need some more help, evening that out and knowing more of the positive and revisiting that. So hopefully that tip works. That will help. Put it into action, whether it's you sitting down on a Friday and journaling, or just reflecting in your mind about what's gone on this week and what's gone well, or whether it is something more formal that you record. Whatever works for you, the most important thing is not about how you do this, but that you do it in a way that works for you, because that's how we offset this negativity bias. That's how we start evening out the brain and firing more of those positive neural pathways. And they don't have to be big wins. It doesn't have to be that you've been promoted this week. It's the small successes. The science behind this actually shows that it's less about the answer and more about asking the question. There's a study called The Upward Spiral where they looked at gratitude practice. And even on people's worst days, when they asked the question, what am I grateful for? Even on the worst days where the answer that came back was nothing, it didn't matter. You've already fired those pathways, those neural pathways. So asking the question is enough to get your brain searching for the positive. So asking yourself at the end of each week, what's gone well this week? Even if the answer is not much, doesn't matter. You've walked down that overgrown tramping track. You've fired that positive neural pathway, regardless of what's at the end of it. That's enough to start retraining our brain. So I'll leave you with those tips. I'll leave you to your weekend. I hope you're having a fabulous day. And if you're in Wellington, I hope you've been able to enjoy some of this spring sunshine. Have a fabulous weekend, everyone. Ka kite ana.